Dream, search, drive. Cars.co.za.
Who am I?
Whoever you are, with budget you could save $420 per month.
Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive me for wearing my sunglasses. I hate wearing my sunglasses on camera, but the glare today is killing me. I can barely see. I actually think it's safer for me to wear my sunglasses, so if you don't mind. So you are joining me as I drive a MkIII VR6 for the very first time. This is it. This is the Vurra, a car which has become part of the rich tapestry of South African motoring culture. It's a car which has buried itself into the hearts of South African petrol heads, and I think I'm about to find out why. So this car is 28 years old. The owner's had it for a long time now, and he's never let anyone else drive his car until now. He's very excited, but he's also chain smoking. He's a bit nervous. So no pressure, Ciro, just this guy's pride and joy, you know? It's funny, I stress more when I drive cars like this than when I drive like 8 million rand Ferraris and Lamborghinis and stuff, because you know those things can be fixed and replaced. These are valuable. These really mean something to people. So let's go back 3 decades to the wild 90s when Volkswagen released the MkIII GTI and people weren't that impressed, and so they came up with a plan. Let's put one of our biggest engines into our hot hatch. And the VR6 was born. So under the bonnet is a 2.8 litre VR6 engine, pushing out a whopping 128 kilowatts, which at the time was good for a 0 to 100 sprint of about 8 seconds. So things have got a little bit faster since then. The owner said I must push it a bit down the straight. He wants to hear it. Things may have got faster. Wow. But I don't think they sound better. This sounds glorious. Oh, what a lovely noise. I kind of get now where Vurra comes from. South Africans are so good at describing things. We're really good at like words that sound like what they mean, like gatful. You know, is there a more descriptive word than gatful? But Vurra fits the noise. It fits the sound of this car. Oh, that is a really delightful, enjoyable exhaust note. I'm really liking that. And of course, not only have cars sort of become maybe a little bit more muted in sound, but they've also become heavier. And so these 128 kilowatts, while they're not a lot by modern standards, I mean, almost double in the Golf MkIII R from its 2 litre, but what do we weigh here? Probably about a ton, I would say. Maybe a little more. And lightness is something about cars which is just missing these days. That 3rd gear pull is so nice. Loving that 3rd gear ratio. It just seems to fit the engine perfectly. Seems to be a bit of a sweet spot for the engine. And in these old cars, you really can feel exactly what the front tires are doing all the time. In these older cars, you are much more connected with the driving experience. Look, I appreciate how safe modern cars have become and how comfortable they've become. I mean, if you ask me to drive back to Cape Town in one of these cars, I'm probably not going to choose the MkIII VR6. But for a weekend drive, for that nostalgia, for a really engaging motoring experience, this is pretty hard to beat. And you know what? It actually sets the bar really high. You kind of feel that this is where Golf really started getting into its stride. This is when Volkswagen thought, okay, maybe the Golf can be more than the GTI. Maybe it can be more than just a practical runaround. Maybe it can be something super. I reckon in the hands of a good driver, something like this, back in the day, you would have chased some serious machinery around. Ah, this is lovely. Not sure I want to stop. This is it. This is the VR6 swan song. Well, at least for most of the world's markets. Funnily enough, you can still buy this engine brand new in China. They still make it for the Passat in China. They even make a turbocharged version just for fun. But this was the OG, the naturally aspirated 24-valve version, 184 kilowatts in this tune in this country. And I remember as a young motoring journalist, as a aspiring petrol head, I remember being given this car as a test car and having a very nice week. This particular unit is in great shape. It's a 2008, 146,000 kilowatts? 146,000 kilometers on the clock, and it feels new. It looks new. It's so impressive. I'm really delighted and amazed by these cars that we have here today. And just jumping in and out of them back to back is just probably one of the greatest privileges you can have as a petrol head or a motoring journalist. So, where does VR6 come from? Well, the V is V motor in German, and then the R is for Reihenmotor, which means inline, and that sort of gives you a clue as to how the engine is configured. It's very strange. It's one block, 6 cylinders, obviously, but one head. They share a head, and they only have 2 cams, because even if it's 24 valve, it only needs 2 cams. So it was a very clever design, because it was actually quite cheap to make. And it saved on a lot of costs and a lot of components. And so they really could spread this engine out. You got this engine in the Audi TT, you got this engine in the Porsche Cayenne, for instance, you got it in the Passat, and it's still used, as I mentioned, in China in a couple of different models over there, some SUVs on the Chinese Passat, for instance. Such a versatile engine. But of course, the way things went, the Mk6 would then be the first 2-liter Golf R, and then the 7 and now the 8, those are all 2 liters. The 4, the 3, the 5, these were the OGs. Started off with 2.8 liter, moved up to 3.2 liters of displacement. For this, the Mk5, the MkV, oh, that's a lovely lusty sound. That this for me is where VW really got their mojo back when it came to the GTI, and so the R32 had to be pretty special. And the key difference here really, and this is sort of where things got a little bit bloated after this for the MK6. This car still feels light. So yes, you do have a fairly heavy lump under the bonnet, and yeah, it's going to be a little bit understeery, but you also get nice lift off oversteer as well. You get this chuckability to it that maybe was lacking, or maybe you don't necessarily find in some of the later models. This car feels fun, it feels playful, it feels joyful. Long legs. That's nice. Subtle. Yeah, I think on racetracks you sort of lose a little bit of the relativity when it comes to speed. You know, it's like, I'm sure if you've ever driven down, say, an airport runway, you sort of have an idea of what I'm talking about. You could be doing 200 and it feels like you're doing 80. When you're out in the real world and you've got the real world around you and you've got some context for your speed, I remember this car just feeling really, really quick, like quicker than just about anything I'd driven at that point. And it will always be a highlight for me. And so this is a very nostalgic little drive. And I've got to say, it's as good as I remember. Now the Mark6 marked, see what I did there, a departure for Volkswagen, because Golf VR6 Mark III was a 6-cylinder engine. Golf IV R32, which was never sold in South Africa, was a 6-cylinder engine. Golf V was a 6-cylinder engine, the Mark V for the R. And then for this, they decided, nope, we're going back to 2 liters. And I wonder what it was. I wonder if it was emissions or if it was some sort of regulation, cost cutting, who really knows. But this was the first time that essentially the R and the GTI became a lot more related. So in here, basically the Mark V engine, the 2-liter, just uprated turbo and a couple of other bits and pieces to make it faster. 188 kilowatts in here. And Mark V was, for me at least, where Volkswagen really got their groove back. Mark IV was a landmark car. It really sort of changed the market, but the GTI version of the Mark IV was a bit meh. And as I said, we didn't get the R32 here, so I've never experienced that car. Maybe it was an absolute barnstormer. Interestingly, Golf Mark IV R32 was the first time a production car had been fitted with a dual clutch gearbox, the DSG, which is now synonymous with Volkswagen. And so they had a strong act to follow with the Golf 6. Now, the remarkable thing about the car that I'm sitting in right now is that it has done 200,000 kilometers. So it must be one of the higher mileage Golf R MK6s in the country, I'm guessing. And let me tell you, this feels good. It feels tight, like toit. Like it's still, you know, up for anything really, up for a bit of a chuck around. Damn, I'm impressed. This feels good. This car has held up really, really well. I think this is, for me, when Golf started becoming sort of great all-rounders, the best of everything really. The sort of comfortable car that you can cruise in, that you can daily in, but then also has, you know, a bit of extra hot sauce for the weekends. Maybe for a little bit of track use if you feel like destroying your tires. But while it is a great all-rounder, there is somewhere where it's missing, where it's lacking. And now that I've experienced the 6-cylinder Golfs, it's the noise. It's just flat. There's just not much happening here. I mean, it's not bad. It's not a bad noise. It's not dull. But it just doesn't have that lovely throatiness, that bassiness of the 6-cylinder motors. But I wonder how much Volkswagen enthusiasts actually care. It's difficult to say. If you've never experienced a VR6 motor, I suppose you just wouldn't have a frame of reference really, and this is just how Golfs sound. But driving them back to back is so illuminating, and they're all very, very similar in character, but there is just that one dimension where the VR6s are just better, and that is in oral pleasure. That never sounds right. Let's open it up a little bit on the main straight here. There we go. Right, out onto the pits in the Golf 7R. Huge thank you to the owner for A, being here so early for a sunrise shoot, and B, letting me drive his car. Right, the Golf 7R. This generation was chopped in half. I'm sure you all remember the Golf 7.5 R, which received a bit of a power bump. So in this one you got 206 kilowatts because we were designated as a hot weather market, like the USA and Australia, for instance. 206 kilowatts, 380 newtons. But this car developed a reputation as a bit of a drag strip quarter-mile hero. It just seemed to be really, really quick off the line, and fitted with a DSG gearbox, you were looking at 0 to 100 here in about 4.9, but it seemed faster. People just seemed to get a lot out of this engine. It also turned into a bit of a tuner darling as well, and guys were chasing 400 kilowatts, 300 kilowatts in here. There were some very, very fast, and are some very, very fast Golf 7Rs around the country and around the world, that's for sure. So under the bonnet, the EA888 engine, quite different to the GTI's engine, quite a lot of modified parts, different head, for instance, larger turbo, larger intercooler to cope with all the power, well, to help make all the power. Now keep in mind, when this car came out in Europe with 221 kilowatts, that was a huge jump from the Golf 7 GTI, because at the time the Golf 7 GTI was tuned to about 160 odd kilowatts. Wasn't much more powerful than that. And so this was really quick. This was the most powerful Golf that they'd ever made at this point. This particular example that I'm driving has just held up really beautifully. The owner actually owns quite a famous tuning shop here in PE, and he's responsible for some monsters, including that incredible RSQ3 which he used to race at Samola Hill Climb. That's some of his work as well. And this is actually his mom's car. They have multiple VW products in the garage. Pretty cool mom driving a Golf 7R. You know, in hindsight now, this Golf 7R felt like peak VW. I mean, you can argue that this is the sort of convergence of the Audi and the VW hot hatches, because essentially this is an Audi S3 really. But the Golf 7R just seemed to have so much character. The S3 always seems to be overshadowed by the RS3, and I suppose that makes sense, but the Golf 7R was the pinnacle, and they maybe would have made a Golf R400. There were rumors of that at the time, but the VW diesel emissions scandal, well, that sort of took their mind off things. Well, they had to focus on other problems. And so this and the 7.5R remained the pinnacle of the Mark 7 generation. And in fact, this is very much the foundation for the Golf 8. The chassis actually hasn't changed too much. The platform is virtually identical, really. There's just an all-new all-wheel drive system that you can decouple the rear axle completely. And there's just a bunch of newer tech. The engine, the Gen 4 version of the MkIII has changed a fair bit from this Gen 3 version. But safe to say that the Golf 7 R will go down as a bit of a legend in hatchback circles. This really had all the right ingredients. I actually have fond memories of this car because when we were sort of gathering steam on the Cars.co.za YouTube channel, we did a big drag day and this car came out and it pretty much beat everything that it ran up against, and those videos did very well on our channel. So good memories with this thing. And I remember spending about a week with the car at the time and just thinking, this is just such an epic daily. Like, what more do you want from a daily? It just does everything well. Comfortable, it's quiet if you need it to be, it's loud if you need it to be. It's a robot to robot shotgun. Suffice it to say that, you know, the Golf has sort of changed in nature from the Mark I. I mean, you know, in VW's defense, I suppose there's the Polo underneath this and there's the Up underneath that, and you could say that the Up is probably closer in spirit to the Mark I Golf. But Golf 7, I suppose, just represented something else. It represented the best of Volkswagen hot hatches. And I think it will always be remembered for that.
Thanks for watching. Now, did you know that Cars.co.za has a brilliant app? It's actually one of the most popular apps in South Africa, and that's because it's actually really bloody good to use. You can save your favorites. So while you're shopping, you know, if you're taking a couple of weeks to shop, you just save your favorites so you don't lose them. And it's also a brilliant way of finding new car specs and pricing. It's incredibly detailed. I use it all the time. The link to the app is in the description below. You can get it on iOS and Android, and it's in the Huawei app gallery, I think it's called. Yes, that is what it's called. Cool, alrighty, and I'm done. Good? Okay.
I cheer!
Who am I?
Whoever you are, with budget you could save $420 per month.
Cars.co.za.